In this video, we're going to look at techniques for filtering data in our pivots so we can focus on just the information that we need. We're in the Investment tab, and Rohan would like to see the total investment in 2001 for Argentina. So let's make a couple of changes to our pivot table. I'm going to pop years into the column section, and then I'm going to add recipient country. We're getting a really large data set here, so we need a way of zooming in and just seeing the information we need. Both the row labels and column label header fields allow us to both sort and filter the data. So for example, if I come to the column labels and click the drop down, each individual year is represented here. And I can just untick all and choose 2001 and say OK. And then I could do something very similar for the row labels. So I'm going to click the drop down and I'm going to untick all and I'm going to choose Argentina, and there's my answer. But Rohan now wants to have a look at Argentina and Brazil. So we're going to come back to the row labels. We could just start scrolling through, but we have a lot of data. It might be quicker to search. So clicking in the search box, I'm going to type BRAZ, and there's only one country that meets that description. But if I just click OK, it's going to replace my Argentina filter. And I want to add this to the current selection, so I'm going to tick that option and say OK, and now I've got both. To clear a filter, we have a few options. You can come back to the original row label and just clear that particular filter. But when you have a lot of filters, manually clearing each one could be quite slow. So a nice option, and some quicker options if you like, if you come to your pivot table analyze and select the clear, there's an option to clear filters. The problem with this is it's always 2 clicks. I prefer the data tab, which gives you the same clear filter, and that will clear all the filters from that pivot. So I'm going to click on that and we're back. Let's look at a couple of more slightly sophisticated filters. So in the next example, Rohan wants to see investment in all countries beginning with a B for 2015 and onwards. Coming to our row labels first, we could start unchecking everything that doesn't begin with a B, but again, not really efficient. If you come to your label filters, however, you get all sorts of options for filtering text. And we want begins with. So I'm going to choose that, type a B, it's not case sensitive, and say OK. And we get a similar selection for working with dates. I'm going to come to column labels, and I'm going to come to date filters, and wow, what a great selection. We actually want all dates after a certain date. So I'm going to choose the after, and I'd be tempted to just type 2014. But remember, these aren't actually years. They're actually real dates. So I have to put in a full date. So I'm going to just put 31st of the 12th, 2014. Now, one little caution. If my dates contain times, midday on the 31st of the 12th, 2014, is considered to be after the 31st of the 12th. So that wouldn't actually be filtered out. What you can do to avoid that problem is select whole days, and that will ignore the times. I can now say OK, and the filter has been applied. Let's clear those filters again. So on my data tab, I'm clicking clear filter, and we're now going to remove the year from the columns. So I'm going to grab that and drop it off. Now the last question Rohan wants to ask is, what were the top 5 recipient countries for 2010? Now this time I don't actually want to filter my row label. I want to filter by amount. So I'm going to come to my row labels field header, but instead of label filters, I'm going to choose value filters. And you'll see right at the bottom, we even have the option to do a top 10. It doesn't have to be a 10. It doesn't even have to be items. That could be percent. Now we want the top 5, and I'm going to click OK. And they are my top 5 recipient countries. But this is across all the years. So there's one more step we need to narrow this down to show us just the 2010 data. But we no longer have the year information in our pivot. What you can do if you want to filter by a field that you don't necessarily want to show in the pivot is you can use the filters area. And that's exactly what we're going to do. So we're going to find years and drag it and drop it into the filters area. So this has added a filter above our pivot table, and you can add as many as you like. Now it's still showing me the data for all the years, but if I click the drop down and select 2010 and say OK, it is now just showing me the top 5 recipients in 2010. So these filter fields are immensely useful, but they have one other amazing feature. And to demonstrate this, I'm going to ask you to come to the RE versus non-RE pivot and just click inside it. What we actually want to do here is, Rohan's been asked to produce 3 separate reports. One showing this information for the year 2000, one for 2010, and one for 2017. Now what he doesn't want to have to do is filter the data. Copy-paste field, copy-paste, and keep repeating that process. And we often find ourselves in that position. So what we're going to do is actually use that filter field to produce the reports for us. Let's start by adding year to our filter field. And then we're going to come up to our filter. Click the drop down. This time I want multiple items. So I'm going to check select multiple items, untick all, and we're going to choose 2000, 2010, and 2017, and then say OK. What this is actually showing us is the cumulative totals for those 3 years, which is not what we want. But that's step number 1. Now step number 2, we're going to come to Pivot Table Analyze. We're going to find the Options button on the left. We're going to click the drop down next to it, and we're going to choose Show Report Filter Pages. It's checking that's the filter we want to use, which is correct. So we're going to say OK. And we're now looking at the report for 2000. If we have a look at our worksheet tabs, you'll see we also have a report for 2010 and for 2017. So what we did there was use the filter in our original report to generate multiple other reports. Amazingly quick. So to recap, we've looked at how we can use both row labels and column labels to filter our data, and how we can use our filter fields to add filters for values that are not in the pivot, and to generate pivot reports using the Show Report Filter Pages. There is one more amazing filter option called a slicer, which we're going to show you next week when we start doing our dashboard.